You're watching Switzer. Well, now for something different. Dubber Corporation calls itself the world's most scalable call recording service. The company listed on the ASX in March this year, and it enables telcos and their customers to think about capturing voice data in a way that they've never previously considered. And it's all based in the cloud. Well, here to tell us how it works is Managing Director Steve McGovern. Steve, welcome to Switzer. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Dan. Pleasure. Thank you.
Now, tell us what Dubber is all about and how does it work?
Yeah, Dubber is a native cloud call recording platform, and it's focused on an industry which is obviously traditional in nature. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we're transforming it because our scale, which you just mentioned, changes the way businesses and indeed telcos can think about using call recordings in the future.
So these recordings are instantly live and they're available anywhere, anytime in the cloud, is that right?
Yeah, so the core attributes of Dubber are three things. It's basically the scale, and that enables the recordings to be live. I'll explain more about that in minutes. And also what it means for the end user is that it's a complete OPEX rather than CAPEX proposition. So from our perspective, because we have the scale, our mantra in an industry which is all about freeing up storage and a hardware base with limitations, we're about bringing more recordings into the platform because we believe that there'll be a future useful as a data asset. We think that the spoken word is something that isn't captured at the moment. You wouldn't throw away an email from a valued client, and we say don't throw away a call because there's probably some highly important information in that call that you may be able to use, whether for reference or to trigger some workflow optimization platforms that you may put in place in the future.
Okay, so where do you see the biggest demand for call recording services, and is it a growing market?
Yeah, so the market is growing because I think regulatory is pushing it that way. And I think that traditionally most people think of call recording as being a regulatory tool. We're slightly different, so we see a massive opportunity in the telco sector. Telcos are moving towards unified communication platforms. They've got some of their core revenues under threat, particularly in the call revenue sector, and they're looking for value-added services. And what we think we can do is we can provide a overlay into a telco network where it can offer value-added services to its clients, not just for regulatory, but in actual fact for positive business reasons as well. So allowing customers to understand more about their own customers and basically build up an IP base around their own business.
So telcos is one space that you'll obviously be targeting, but as I understand it, you've also got a pretty major deal with one of the big four banks, the details of which are subject to a non-disclosure agreement though. But it is a pretty major source of revenue for the business. Just through that deal, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So obviously it is under non-disclosure, and the reason for that is that part of what we do is provide, if you like, the utility for call recording in the telco industry, but we also have value-added tools over the top. So in this case, part of the project is using a biometrics engine and to create metadata where at the moment there isn't metadata, and so we can actually identify speak on telephone calls, and that enables the bank to likewise manage its own data from the recordings.
Wow. So just for that bank specifically, just tell us about the solution that you've provided, because I would assume that your clients would expect a pretty secure and safe solution on behalf of their own customers. So how tailored is the product, particularly from a security perspective?
Yeah, so this particular solution is very tailored. Essentially, there's a requirement to take an enormous amount of recordings and store them and make them available for analysis, and that's obviously where the Dubber platform comes in. And we can, as I say, use a biometrics engine to be able to actually identify who's on those calls, whereas previously that hasn't been possible. So these are legacy recordings that have been made over a number of years, and the client, in this case a major bank, feels it's important to know who's on those calls. And we're able to do that with 95 to 98% accuracy.
So what does the rest of your client base look like now? How many customers have domestically and overseas as well?
Yeah, so we have in Australia, we have about 4,500 direct customers, SME customers, who are using Dubber for vanilla recording applications. We have telco contracts in the US and the UK, which will add to that significantly. I think, we look at a telco as being a provider of many thousands of recordings, depending on the size of the telco and the application. And we're all about actually getting the Dubber platform on net. Because it is scalable, What it means for a product manager of a telco is that they can enable recording across their entire base. And in our industry, that's not been possible until now because there are limitations regarding hardware licenses and the like.
What's a vanilla recording?
Well, a vanilla recording is typically where there's a client in a call centre or financial services who might want to record all their calls for verification reasons, for compliance reasons. We obviously provide that, but I think where we're different is that we enable telcos to offer recordings across their entire base, and that means that casual users, or classic example, in the financial services industry in Australia, it's unregulated in terms of comparisons with the US and the UK. Very often people in financial services at the top end of the business like to record the calls, but there are cost imposts or technical imposts. Sometimes the people on the desk don't want to record all the calls. I haven't met anyone in the industry that wouldn't like to record a call when they want to for a particular client or a particular scenario. And because we can enable a telco to pass that through to their clients and record the entire base, what that means is that record effectively is always available when the customer wants it, and that's a world first through the telco networks.
And Australian regulation is supportive of this?
Australian regulation is a little bit behind in terms of what it requires the financial services sector to do.
Okay.
But in terms of support, yeah, so in the UK, for example, any financial services licence requires call recording on its inbound calls. And Australia doesn't impose that on the financial services sector at the moment. Again, we're talking about regulatory, which is an important part of our business and a growing part. But I think from our perspective, we know that Dubber's made it when a pizza shop in Hammersmith is able to record its calls. It can take credit card details over the phone. It's PCI compliant because we provided it with a PCI compliant biometrics tool to take out the credit card details. And the reason why we know that Dubber's been successful is because we've sold it to a UK telco, they've passed it on to their end user, and the end user's improved his business, and there are revenue streams all the way through.
One of your key promises to shareholders is to surpass the limitations of existing systems out there in the market. What would you say that your, I guess, core point of difference is to your competitors?
It really is all about scale, and so once you have scale, then the value services come with it. So the core difference is that traditionally, call recording is about implementing hardware, putting licenses over the top. Those licenses and the databases that support them are restricted in their scalability, and so typically it gets, the platform gets used for, and then in a typical recording scenario, the servers are cleaned, the storage is freed up. We're not about that. We're about bringing recordings into the platform because we believe that they'll be usable as a data asset going forward. So we're actually diametrically opposed to the current recording scenario. Again, because of our scale, we're built directly into Amazon.
You've also recently tapped the market for almost $6 million to fund your expansion.
We did.
As I understand it, part of that capital will be used to grow the brand into the UK, which you've just explained is pretty good for the regulation side of things, but also Europe and America. Yep. Where do you see your biggest growth market?
I think at the moment it's Europe. So we are aligned both technically and also in a commercial sense with Microsoft, which is the backbone to many of the telco networks around the world. And our offering our scalable offering has been well received in that market. So we would see that take-up in the short term is very much with the European telcos. America is somewhere that we've just been to in the last 2 or 3 months, and we think that that will probably be second quarter next year. But certainly right now we have demand that we need to satisfy in Europe. Technically we can accommodate all the demand, and I think we just need some account management feet on the floor to look after them.
Steve, it's a fascinating business. Congratulations on your success so far, and we're looking forward to hearing an update from you in the near future.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.